Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Donkey Projections. I'm Eric, and we have Lucas as always.
Hey everyone.
Today is June 24th, 2021, and today we are going to be debriefing the first night of the New York 2021 mayoral primary results. We're going to be talking about who's in the lead, and we're going to be going borough by borough to explain who won the borough the most in what areas, and what type of patterns do we see based on different types of demographics.
And with that being said, let's get right into it. All right, I'll start with a quick summary of what happened. Eric Adams ended up starting off with a very strong lead. Yeah, 31% of the vote. That's a very commanding lead so far. Note that it says 83% reporting because the rest are absentee. They're not going to be starting. They're not going to start counting that until next Monday. Sorry, next Tuesday. Maya Wiley surprisingly ended up in second. We were expecting, third place or fourth place. She ended up in second. And partially this is because we haven't gotten the mail-in votes yet, which we'll explain later in the video, will greatly favor Kathryn Garcia. Kathryn Garcia ended up in third place, which is kind of what we expected. But again, 83% reporting, we're expecting the first choice votes to greatly favor Kathryn Garcia after we get the mail-in ballots in. Now, the big surprise was Andrew Yang. He only got 11.7%. We expected a lot more. You saw our prediction. We predicted like 22% for him. Yeah, we got this wrong. He got a lot less than what we did predict. And we're going to kind of dig into the results as to why this happened. But a quick overview. Adams, very well in Brooklyn, obviously. But Wiley did well too. We'll explain why. Garcia crushed Manhattan. We actually didn't predict this. We honestly probably should, looking at it in hindsight, looking at all the factors. She crushed Manhattan. Queens, Yang did not do as well as we expected him to do, and Wiley ended up getting second. We didn't expect Yang to get third in Queens. We really did not. Bronx, Adams crushed it, and then Staten Island, Adams is going to win. But again, Staten Island really doesn't matter. But let's dig deeply into the results. So let's start off with Manhattan. And as we mentioned, Kathryn Garcia crushed Manhattan. Why was this? So first of all, she completely, crushed Lower Manhattan. I actually have a map here that shows the New York City by race. The red color is white areas, strongly predominantly white areas. Orange is Hispanic, blue is black, and green is Asian. So these heavily white areas went strongly for Kathryn Garcia. All of these areas here, they all went to Kathryn Garcia. And not only was it about race here, but I think it was also about her being more of a technocrat. This is a great article from 538, the five boroughs of New York City. So this part of Lower Manhattan was part of the elite circles. And as it mentions here, this is a very highly educated area, very highly college educated area. Garcia is a very technocratic candidate, sanitation commissioner. New York City Times, the New York Times endorsed her. She did very well here, and she picked up lots of votes. In addition, in Upper Manhattan, however, we saw a different story. We actually saw a mixed bag here between Wiley and Adams. She actually did pretty well with black voters up here in Upper Manhattan. However, it did seem like Adams performed very well with the Hispanics, and this is a general pattern we've seen. This handle over here. Eric Adams did perform generally pretty well with these Hispanic areas, and Garcia, there was this little one in white area here, went very well for Kathryn Garcia, and of course, I guess it's worth mentioning, but there was this little part that was Asian down here that went to Andrew Yang. He did very well with Asian voters, and I'll pass it over to Eric now to discuss the Bronx.
Yeah, so we see how this racial consistency pattern kind of continues. So, Lucas will be going a lot back and forth between the mayoral primary map and like which candidate took over which area and the racial map because of how closely related they are. And, these are only the first patterns that we've noted that are, correlated by race. So let's look at the Bronx now. So the Bronx is the least college educated area, and they were rooting for more of like a blue collar candidate type of person, and that's exactly how Eric Adams portrayed himself, and we see that translated into the map because Eric Adams swept most of the Bronx. It's populated by a few Hispanics and blacks people as well, as Lucas will show in the Bronx. There's a huge black area in the Bronx and also some Hispanic area. And, they're also very pro-establishment. And as we know, Eric Adams was, very popular and he made quite the presence in the coming weeks in this mayoral primary.
And right, the other thing to know is that Eric Adams did very well with Hispanics. Look at this area here. It's like completely blue. And it does seem like a lot of Hispanics do favor his views, such as having more policing. Been the very strong law and order pro policing candidate. So heading now to the Queens. The Queens, it kind of surprised us in our predictions, but honestly, we probably should have gotten this correct. Upper Queens obviously went very heavily for Andrew Yang, very Asian area in the Queens. In addition, there were some little white areas here, and again, and I keep saying it's interesting to see how closely aligned this map was to the racial divide. A lot of white people here, and a lot of it went to Kathryn Garcia. Now, down in Elmhurst, also went to Andrew Yang, very Asian American area. Southern Manhattan was a different story. It's a pretty strong African American location, and as a result, Eric Adams did very well in this area. You see very lots of blue here, and it did seem like that Eric Adams did pretty well with African American voters. But the other thing is, in a lot of these places, Maya Wiley usually did come second as well. I think these were the two candidates that were pretty popular among African American voters. So, not this wasn't too much of a surprise in Queens. And I'll turn it over to Eric now for Brooklyn.
Yeah, and as we also predicted, we did think that Eric Adams would sweep Brooklyn as well because he is the Brooklyn borough president here, and he made quite the presence in Brooklyn as well, and people really knew him here. And as I said earlier, this is translated into the map. There, as Lucas will show the map again, there is quite the African American population right in this central Brooklyn area, and that's exactly the area where Andrew Yang swept. And if I mean Eric Adams swept. And if we go into the southeastern corner of Brooklyn, there is a very highly Orthodox Jewish area right in this red area that shows like non-Hispanic white people. And that's exactly where Andrew Yang really swept. And Eric Adams did come in second, but Andrew Yang was very prominent in this area of Brooklyn. And we did explain how Jews and Hispanic people were getting underpolled and that their support was for Andrew Yang. And we really do see that in this area because, it is correlated by race, and we do see that Yang has swept this area. And another part of Brooklyn that we have to mention is that circular elite area where Lucas kind of touched upon, where it's the most college educated and it's the most progressive area in New York City. Like out of all of the areas in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens, this area in Brooklyn and like the circle between Western Manhattan and Eastern Brooklyn, like Northeast Brooklyn or Northwest Brooklyn, I should say, that's like a huge like educated center. And as you see by the yellow, most of those votes went to Maya Wiley. She's more of a progressive Democrat, and these the more progressive sector of New York would assumingly vote for a more progressive candidate, and that's exactly what we see. So these a lot of these patterns are very obvious and expected, which is very interesting to see how like organized this race is per se.
And also to add, it seemed that Maya Wiley did pretty well in the slightly white areas. And I find it super fascinating that the New York Times was able to get this like on the dot correct. This was published on June 11th, 21st. They correctly said, Kathryn Garcia would do well in the lower Manhattan area, upper Brooklyn. They expected Maya Wiley to do very well. That was very much supported. And as the New York Times article also mentioned, highly educated areas they predicted them to go very well for Garcia and Maya Wiley. And of course, Staten Island, I'm gonna be honest. I don't really care about Staten Island that much. It doesn't really impact the race that much. I think only 20,000 or no, 70,000 people in Staten Island actually voted. In total, the race was made up of 700,000 voters. So, and it's gonna be more after absentee ballots come in too. So it doesn't really end up playing that much of a factor. But generally, we saw the same pattern as well. This was an area that Kathryn Garcia actually did pretty well in as well. Even though she didn't do that well in areas outside of Manhattan, she did pretty well in Staten Island. And, Staten Island is a pretty white area. And also, we did see Andrew Yang do partially well because there were some pretty Asian areas in Staten Island as well. Top of Staten Island, what's strongly for Eric Adams, pretty African American region. But overall, again, as Eric has, it was very interesting to see how organized it kind of was. Final thing we want to touch on here is the absentee votes. I'm not sure whose account this was. Oh, Nathaniel Rakic. This was a good account showing where the absentee ballots really are. So let me quickly close these tabs. But, when you compare these two maps, you start to realize how many of these absentee votes that are outstanding are from Kathryn Garcia areas, Lower Manhattan. Many of these places are from, these are Kathryn Garcia areas. That's where the absentee ballots are missing. Staten Island, even. A lot of these areas are Kathryn Garcia areas. Upper Queens is a little different. These are more Andrew Yang areas. However, it is important to remember, Andrew Yang told his supporters, put Kathryn Garcia second. Could that end up being impacting the race? I think it could. With the ballot transfers, it could really end up impacting the final rounds and subsequent rounds. Brooklyn, interestingly enough, a lot of these areas were Maya Wiley areas. So generally, where the bulk of the absentee ballots are missing, they're not from Eric Adams areas, but they're more from Wiley or mainly Garcia's areas. So what does this mean for the subsequent rounds? Obviously, these are not the final results. I will say this. I think that Eric Adams is definitely favored to win. I don't think that it's as high as some people are saying. Some people are saying like 90% chance that Eric Adams is going to win. I don't think it's that high. I think he's favored. I think we should wait until next week when we get the absentee ballots to make our final prediction on where exactly all the vote transfers go and what this exactly means for the race. But for today, that is the end of the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. If you like our content, please subscribe. And we'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.